Hello, hello, and welcome to another episode of the Call to Adventure podcast with me, George B. I hope you're all good, listeners and watchers. So we're adding lots of 2022 trips, which is very exciting. If you're interested, head over to the site and take a peek. There's loads there, but just to whet your appetite, we've got a week-long course in winter mountaineering in the Pyrenees, which I'm going on as well. And I'm super pumped for because that was cancelled last year due to COVID. So we've got 3 dates for that, still with a few spaces. We've got some bikepacking in the Peak District. That's back for 2022 by popular demand. And we've got a few new trips in the works as well. So if you're keen, head over to the site, sign up to the newsletter, and you'll get booking priority discounts and a chance to win free trips. So head over to calltoadventure.uk to sign up if that floats your boat. But now on to today's episode. So we'll be chatting with Harrison Ward, aka the Foodie. He's an outdoor cook, hiker, and mental health advocate. So without further ado, Harrison, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, George. Thanks for having me.
I'm glad that we've had a few technical difficulties, haven't we, making this happen, and a few different lighting changes, few location changes. So it's good to finally be here. Now we're live doing it.
Absolutely, yeah. I guess rural issues. It'd have been easier to record it on the hillside, I think.
Sometimes you do wonder, don't you?
Yeah.
Right, so Harrison, we'll kick off with some quickfire listener questions. So these are just some favourites that people like just to get the juices flowing. So it's quickfire, just whatever comes into your head, okay? You ready?
Got it.
What is your favourite cheese?
Wensleydale.
Why Wensleydale?
I don't know. First one that came in my head. It's not even my favourite. But I was on the spot.
I put way more pressure on there than needed to be, didn't I? There's no real rush, but we'll go with Wednesday. What would you go for now if you got a bit more time to consider?
Oh, I'd maybe say something like that's Revolution maybe, or Roquefort perhaps.
Yeah,
it felt a bit like Family Fortunes just then. I think it was a case of I could see it on the screen. Wrong answer, but yeah. I like cheese. I'll go with cheese. All cheese.
All cheese, yeah. If you could have any superpower, what would it be?
Stopping time.
Stopping time? Yeah, I don't think we've had that one before.
Yeah.
What made you go with stopping time?
I think so long as I could still move around. I mean, Bernard's watch was sort of my era. I think it was always fantastic that you could just sort of stop and do what you liked in infinite time and then just switch it back on again. So I'm generally always late, to be fair. I suppose that's quite a theme of our podcast attempts too. So I suppose, stopping time would probably help me to certain degrees. It's yeah.
A good
I've already got one superpower, I think, and that's being able to sleep anywhere and sleep through any sounds. But that's a bit of a rubbish one, really.
Oh, I think that's a pretty good superpower to have. I used to have that. I remember I fell asleep like standing up on a bus once, and afterwards I was just like, yeah, this is a great like superpower to have. I've kind of lost it as I've got older. I don't know why I've got some kind of kryptonite around me that doesn't help me sleep anywhere anymore. But it's a good thing to have, right?
I think so. Yeah. It's got advantages, but it's also got disadvantages. But
yeah. If you fall asleep too easily, are you a sleep through the alarmer?
Absolutely. Oh, slept through fire alarms. Yeah, so that's what I mean. It's a bit more of a curse than anything. It's even out in the wild in bivvies, sort of in really cold conditions, I'll still be sleeping in the morning, absolutely fine. That's it. Just shut off like hibernation.
That's such a good power to have. What about in a hammock? Have you ever slept in a hammock and it's like windy and not very warm, and the wind is just like on your back? I think they call it something in the hammocking community. It's called like ice bum or something.
Right.
Would you just go not bother you, even if it's like freezing cold, really windy, just straight out to sleep?
Well, it's a very niche scenario, but yeah, I'd imagine I probably would be fine. I mean, the closest I've come, I suppose, is bivvying on the hilltop in the snow. I guess that's a similar. I guess you've got the cold of the snow on your back already with the wind as well.
Yeah,
but you haven't got the rocking motion, have you? So that maybe just add to it. That'd be just sort of sleeping baby. It'd be even better.
Yeah, I realise that it sounds very random, me choosing that example, but that's because that's one of the worst night's sleep I've ever had. I was in Mexico and I had salmonella for about 8 weeks at this point. I didn't know that I had it. And we had been down at sea level and it was really warm, like 30 degrees. And then we decided to go into the mountains, I don't know, 1,000 meters up, maybe a bit higher altitude. And then I hadn't really packed accordingly because I'm quite a hot person, so I still just had my shorts, t-shirt, and not really a lot of warm clothes. And I was sick, and I'd just been really, really ill that night, puking my guts up, and not good times. And then got back into the hammock. And then it was freezing cold and I just had like a t-shirt on and some shorts. So I was thinking, would you power through this? Like even a scenario that bad, which is the background to the story.
It's a tough one. But I'm hoping we haven't put any listeners off already at this stage with poor cheese choices and now salmonella sickness. But I suppose if I was cooking, I would hope that I wouldn't be suffering from salmonella. So I don't think I'd have a bad as night of that, George, but that does sound pretty horrific. So I think anyone would struggle to sleep through that.
Good get out. Yeah, I like that. Okay, last one. Who would you be stranded on a desert island with?
Oh, that can't be a quick fire one. That one, that's going to be. You've got to think of that for a while, surely.
We'll wait.
I don't know. Someone who's someone who's an expert on the island with foraging, maybe.
Yeah.
I think that'd be good. We could cook up some nice food then, and they'd know the bits to hand, the fruits and veg of that island. I think would be a good expert to have. Yeah,
nice. Okay, so let's kick off with Foodie. Where did the name? I mean, sounds fairly self-explanatory for people that know you, but for people that don't, how did Foodie come about? Where did the name come from?
So it was all myself. It was something I dubbed myself. Initially, I guess it was me creating a bit of a pseudonym, I guess an anonymous entity. I didn't really share who I was, my first sort of social channels, so I came up with this name. Basically, I'm a Cumbrian, so in this sort of area, we call the hills fells. Again, I don't think it transfers very well south. People just think maybe I fell over or something that way, but I guess that derives originally, the Scandinavian sort of fjall into fells in this area. And then Foodie I went for just because it's a less pretentious term for gastronome, really. So it sort of summed up the fact that I was from this area, was enjoying the hiking, and I also loved my food. So the Fell Foodie was what I went with.
Is it true? So your real name, Harrison Ford? No, your real name's not Harrison Ford. Your real name's Harrison Ward. So hard not to say that. When I was doing the intro,
Sorry.
I was like, don't say Harrison Ford. Is it true that you were named after Harrison Ford?
Very true. Yeah, it was my dad's idea. He had plans of me being nicknamed Indy or Indiana at school. Thankfully, it never happened. But yeah, as you've just done then, I slipped up a bit of a Freudian slip or maybe a Beasley slip. It's it's been one of those. I mean, Harrison Ford has often been what I've been called at many times. I suppose also having two surnames, most people say as well. They always ask, "What's your first name?" When you go, "It's Harrison." Yeah, it's no first name. But yeah, so it gets you in some conversations anyway. I think it's a good icebreaker.
Yeah. So, what about your journey into the outdoors? Can you give us the cliff notes on how you went to getting into the outdoors and becoming the Fell Foodie?
Absolutely, yeah. So I mean, again, I mentioned I was born in Cumbria. I'm from this sort of region, so again, quite a rural area. The beautiful Lake District that's on the doorstep. I'm just outside the Lake District, a bit further north. But really sort of neglected the outdoors growing up, didn't really embrace it too much. Just saw them just as fells, didn't really enjoy them, didn't sort of go up there. Quite an active lifestyle growing up, I guess, but again, still really wasn't embracing that side too much. I moved away for a while to university in York and sort of went through a bit of a different sort of life element there, really, without going sort of too deep with the cliff note sort of element, I guess. I was suffering sort of from depression from quite a young age. Through sort of puberty, and I sort of quite found a lot of solace in alcohol at sort of age 18. This really sort of began to snowball at university to the point where I sort of was drinking sort of daily in excess of at its height over sort of 20 pints a day, really. I was smoking full time, ballooned in weight, a complete life of lethargy. So there was no sort of outdoors in that element. I lived like that till I was about 25, and then sort of got a bit of an awakening moment, I guess, during the breakdown of a relationship. So I came back to Cumbria. I was very honest with what I'd gone through. I'd kept it all secret for those years, so a good sort of maybe 12 years by that point. And basically announced quite publicly to all my sort of friends and family on sort of my personal Facebook at the time what I'd gone through with these issues and why I'd come back to Cumbria. And I was inundated with support from many avenues that I've been ever sort of thankful for. And a lot of people came and sort of basically reached out and tried to take me on different sort of activities that weren't sort of around the drinking sort of culture anymore. So I was taken out on sort of bike rides again, out sort of little walks here and about. And then one friend said, we're going to go for a hike. I knew nothing really what to expect at the time. It was something I didn't really do a lot of as a kid. So I didn't really prepare very well. Again, I was didn't much money to my name or any kit. I'd sort of drank all my sort of money away in those previous years. And just donned a pair of old trainers that I had to hand, really, and a pair of swim shorts and a jumper I'd probably wear down the pub on a Friday night. So, my friend took one look at me and said, you can't go out like that. And he swung by an outdoor store on the way to the lakes and grabbed me a pair of boots, which was a really kind gesture and really sort of started the journey off. And that was it. Sort of frog marched up Blencathra 2 weeks after sort of basically peeling myself off a bar or probably a floor more likely from York and was marched up to the top as quite a sort of unhealthy individual, pining sort of for my ex, I guess, going through all sorts of alcohol withdrawal, stopping smoking and just staring at my feet, one foot after the other, going to the top. So it wasn't the best introduction, I guess, to the outdoors, but it sort of began this whole journey of a turnaround and a bit of an awakening moment. So, yeah, that was the first one. Got to the top, and before I could even take a breath, he sort of looked at me and said, well, we're doing Hellvellyn next week. So it was the same again the following week, and I marched up from the Filmia side straight to the top of Hellvellyn. And it was really sort of that moment, I think, reaching the top of that fell, that looking across down sort of Striding Edge, that obviously I'm sure people are quite au fait with, any listeners here who've been to the Lake Districts. And it really felt like a new addiction was really born in me that day, and a new love. And I just love that sort of sense of endorphin hit I got, happiness, achievement, and also, I guess, the whole physical manifestation it sort of felt with my struggle personally, that I had to go through, of this uphill struggle of heading up the mountainside and pushing on through and not knowing what was ahead, but having to push further forward into what was the harder element rather than backing out and going back down again. So that began it, sparked that new love, and really it went from there. So marching on mountain to mountain, many more mountains in the Lake Districts. Snowdon followed, Ben Nevis followed, and then the sort of the foodie element started to merge with this new passion. So I'd always loved food. That's been something that's been there from a very young age. And initially I was taking sort of quite extravagant packed lunches out with me into the fells as I went. Many sort of jealous onlookers that were having their soggy cling film sandwiches. And and someone suggested that I get a stove and actually maybe start cooking out there from scratch. A bit of a tongue-in-cheek joke at first, but not to shirk a challenge. It was exactly what I did. And that love of the fells, that love of food merged. And that was I love of the outdoors and fell foodie beginning.
Really cool story. That's awesome. What do you think it was that brought you out of the kind of depression, or what was it that the thing that I'm thinking about is, they say that like wisdom is where you can learn from other people's experience, right? Where you don't need to go through maybe hitting rock bottom or whatever it is. Is there something that you think can bring on the epiphany or the new type of behavior without having either somebody else to help you or to really reach rock bottom?
Difficult one. Well worded question as well. It's for me, I think that for me was the only way I could sort of break out the cycle I was in, really hitting that rock bottom phase. I think, especially with the alcohol side, how far I'd fallen with that. I mean, I was as a daily drinker, I was running pubs at this stage. It really was my sole focus and control in life that initially I used as sort of a medicine for my mind, but quickly became a poison and threw me into a deeper hole. I don't think I could have escaped that without hitting rock bottom. I don't think I'd have come to that realization. I think there'd been moments before of intervention and stuff, and to me, I was quite stubborn. That was the way I was sort of going through things, handling my own mind, I guess, and also just existing, going through each day. Again, I suppose stopping time my own way, stopping time by just drinking my life away, just drinking into oblivion. But for others, again, I think it's a huge step, again, that suffering silence thing, that just not doing that at all. I mean, that's something that I did for years and years, never really reaching out to anybody, not wanting to be a burden, not wanting to sort of put my thoughts on anyone else and put a downer on. And the minute I've been sort of helping from this journey, I've had the opposite experience. I've had people just really throwing support out there, throwing over bits of opportunities, and reaching out for help, I think, is a huge thing to do before hitting that rock bottom stage, I'd say. But also in that, I think just little steps. I think little steps really add up. I think you can't get to these, you can't get to the top of a mountain without making that first stride. And again, little steps really adding up. And I was always someone who, I guess, was quite insecure about outside opinions, what people would think about stuff. I mean, I was quite overweight at one point. And again, when I sort of started running or going to the hills, I didn't want to be looking as if I was blowing up my arse, really. But it was it was something that I think, as time went on, I beckoned down more the sort of avenue where, those little steps, if I was making those, then at least it's one more step than the person sat at home on the sofa. So for me, I think little steps do add up, and not to really think that you can't start small. But yeah, a difficult one to answer that, really, because I think for me personally, rock bottom was the turnaround. I wasn't ready to make that change before I hit that point, but yeah.
Do you think that because you've been there, do you think that people need to want to help themselves to be helped? Because it's often something that you hear, right? They say that if somebody is kind of a family member or a friend is really struggling with something and they're in trouble, a lot of people will say, well, you can't help them until they can help themselves. And I don't know that I believe that. I think that there are some things that you can do to help nudge people in directions that they maybe wouldn't have gone without you kind of pushing them that way. But I'd be really keen to hear, what do you think? Do you think somebody can be helped who doesn't really want to be at that point?
I think there's two angles to this one, really. I think I'm thinking of this one from both the alcoholic angle and the depression angle, really. I think those two coincided. Maybe one brought the other into my life, but the two act quite differently, I think. So in terms of the intervention side with the alcohol side of thing, I firmly believe that the person has to want to make that change when it comes to alcoholism. I can look back now, I didn't really see them at the time, but moments of attempted intervention with me, and all it did was push me further to the bottle and resent those people that tried to get in my way and tried to get between me and my vice, I guess, at the time. It wasn't an aggressive thing as such, certainly not physically, but what I'd basically do is just shun it, turn my head, and just basically go and drink myself further into that pit. I can see that now, looking back on those attempts, but at the time, I just saw myself as a heavy drink. It was just an naysayer, whether that be a family or a friend. It was going, "Oh, behave." It's not an issue. I don't see it as an issue. So why are you seeing it as an issue? The mental health side, I think, may be different. I think there's moments where people, if they ask how you are, again, it's always that ask twice sort of thing. People say, "I'm fine," but you ask twice, perhaps sometimes that guard drops a little bit and more comes out. And I think certainly you can provide more help in seeing that, and you can maybe see some more symptoms, but once again, with mental health, I mean, we've become sort of experts at hiding behind a mask, also putting that mask on, putting that front on, where you can almost be quite highly functioning in both avenues as someone suffering from mental illness and from alcoholism, where it might not always be the person you expect. I think sometimes it can come by quite a surprise that the person who's maybe quite extrovert and out there and sort of quite can talk to anybody, then perhaps is suffering from these things in silence to themselves when they're back in their own company. But yeah, I'd say that from the both angles, alcoholism, from my experience, I don't think they can make that change unless they really want it to. The intervention stage, I get a lot of people asking me these days, maybe mothers with sons or partners, asking about their girlfriend or the boyfriend, and how they can intervene. And unfortunately, I'm quite honest with that. And I think if it's got to its deepest point, I think it has to be someone that inside they have to make that change themselves.
Yeah, it's really, really interesting. So the outdoors is an avenue that a lot of people who we've talked with on the podcast have found as a really good way of a coping mechanism, or just a way to build momentum or self-confidence. And you touched on it a little bit before, but what is it that the outdoors does for you? And for people that maybe don't have mates who are into the outdoors, how would you recommend that they go and start getting into it?
Yeah, it's a huge part for me now. It's a key part of my lifestyle. It's something that, again, in sort of the recent months when we've had sort of the lockdowns and various bits through COVID, that it almost feels like it's been stripped back again slightly, and almost losing slight access to it. I mean, I'm very lucky to be in this sort of area of the Lake District. I'm in no way comparing myself to those who've been sort of cooped up in the cities during that time, but it was still also seen as something that you shouldn't be outside too long. Or again, you had lots of mountain rescue in the area saying you shouldn't be up in the hills in case of injury, which I completely understood and respected. But it almost felt as if it was taken away slightly. So it's something that very much has cemented itself with me as something that's a key part of my life these days, and something that is, as you mentioned, a huge coping mechanism for me. And what I see as a vice these days, again, I think a lot of times, I think we always look for things that basically we just want to be happy, right? So I think it's whether or not that's through, adrenaline seekers or heading out in the outdoors, or people might see it through drugs, that short-term hit, or alcohol, where it just gets you to that point of just being happy and forgetting your issues in life for a moment. Obviously, there's the unhealthier consequences to some of those other elements, but the outdoors for me has been one of those that I found that it's been pretty much a pure sort of relaxation tool and a therapy in a way. I mean, they talk about ecotherapy, don't they? Getting out there and sort of thing. And I think it's a huge, huge thing that we've neglected quite a bit, I think, in modern life. I think we are designed to be out there. I think initially as humans, I think that primal aspect is still there. I think just being out in the elements, in the sun when we do get it, it's a rare occurrence in the north, but, we embrace it. We embrace it when it comes. But just being out there again, and the sights and sounds, and being aware and back in that sort of natural landscape that we're used to, I think it has a huge, huge effect on physical and mental well-being for me. So I can completely understand why others have had similar tales of finding that sort of therapy element in the outdoors, because ultimately I think it's just where we're meant to be.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's very unnatural the way that we live now. There's lots of great things about modernity and having food in the supermarket and heating and all that good stuff, but it comes at a cost, right? We have to keep it balanced.
Absolutely. It's creating that hybrid, isn't it? Again, as mentioned before, we wouldn't have those nice cheeses perhaps on offer, so there's a fine contrast. I appreciate the irony of statements there.
Harrison, any favourite spots in the UK or the Lake District? Anywhere that really holds a special place in your heart that you just absolutely love?
There's been a few. I mean, people often ask about sort of your favourite sort of mountains or fells and whatnot to head up, and for me, they all come with sort of different angles, I guess, or different relationships with them at the time, whether it be those initial first steps into that huge life turnaround. Obviously, they'll always hold a key part of my life. Those first three being Blencathra, Hellvellyn and Scafell Pike. Each one followed each other week by week. But then also, it depends who I've been with at the time. There's so much I've had, walks with company that has really held a fine sort of place in my memory from being there, or maybe taking a particular sunset at the time, or even a nice meal on the top that maybe I've cooked or enjoyed with that view. So I find it quite difficult to choose a place based on just its location, but more about actually what the memories hold at the time for there. So lakes-wise, I'm still discovering elements. Even though I've lived here, 5 years, growing up in Cumbria all my life, there's still secret pockets you just keep discovering in these areas. So for me, yeah, I think it's different every time. It just depends on the weather's different, the sunset's different. And I just, enjoy being out there wherever it may be.
Yeah, the lakes is such a good spot, isn't it? It's like being transported to a different world, especially I live in Shropshire, and we have kind of little hills, and they're still nice, like very beautiful, but then you just get there and it's like so exciting. I love it. Such a good spot. Any tips for people who want to try wild camping? So it's kind of a thing that is becoming more and more popular, and I think I've probably caveated wild camping to death. So I don't think we need to labour the point. But for people that want to give it a go, say you're going for your first bivvy, any top tips?
Yeah, I mean, it's not something I've done myself hugely for too long. I guess initially I found sort of tips from peers and things on social media initially about how to sort of get involved again. I sort of camped as a kid, I guess, but mainly on the campsite side of things. And I suppose there were rural areas, so it had the element of wilderness, I guess, to a certain degree. But the wild camping element in the actual mountains for me, again, it's an experience I love. I think just love being out there again, being really at one, being back out there under the stars. Again, and cooking up those nice meals I do as well, which I think really adds to the experience and really heightens that. for me. I wouldn't be heading up there and sort of enjoying one of those boiling the bags of pot noodles personally, but that's just me. But it's, yeah, I think it's an experience that people should take in. But also, I think likewise, there's responsibility to it. It's something that isn't technically legal in sort of this area, and it is in sort of Dartmoor in the UK. But there's talks of maybe even changing that at the moment. But it's something that a blind eye's Turnberry, providing sort of certain rules are sort of followed, if you will. So for me, I think it's the key one there is really leaving no trace. I think if you're out there, sort of leaving that environment as you found it, and also respecting others that are around you. Again, you shouldn't be heading up there and pitching a tent in the middle of the fells in the middle of the day, being sort of a big eyesore, especially if you've got one of these, glorious fluorescent tents that's, bright red or pink in the middle of the hillside. I mean, it's then sort of becoming a blight on that sort of actual view that people are then taking out while they're in the hills. It's not part of the natural landscape. But again, so it's all about sort of pitching up late, leaving no trace, and leaving early in the morning again. So again, you don't want to be sort of almost treat it as if you're sort of on the run, I guess, and you don't want anyone to find you, and you're up there and you're just sort of enjoying the moment and not really wanting to disturb both wildlife, the environment, and any people that may be around. So, but I enjoy that aspect of the fact that it's just that escapism, again, just heading out there and so different to, again, the sort of modern life that we can experience, like quite stressful elements sometimes, people in the jobs rushing around. For me, it's all about slowing down again and just being out there and being exposed to those bits, and also accepting a little bit of the sort of the uncomfortable nature of it as well sometimes, where it can be in there with the weather, or as you mentioned, if the wind's really blowing on your back, not so bad when you're in the tents, if you've got the sort of suitable one there, if you've got suitable equipment, but in the bivvies, it can be sort of, you might not get much sleep out there sort of thing, or you might be sort of packing down in the rain the next morning. But again, I think that's a good thing to always put yourself in this position sometimes to experience a little bit of uncomfortableness on the roller coaster that is really sort of living. So, but yeah, certainly something I'd recommend to people. But just be respectful for the area you're in and respectful for others that are about there. And everyone should enjoy it and be able to keep enjoying it.
Yeah, well said. Leave no trace is what it's all about. If people are interested, there is an article, it's a very long one. I think it's something like 8,000 words that I wrote everything about that I know about wild camping. Probably way too many words, but some people might want to read it. It's all in sections. It's well formatted. So if you just want to see a bit about gear or places to go or all that kind of stuff, then that might be of interest to some people. So you can
8,000. Was that like a blow-by-blow account of each peg going into the ground?
Yeah. Back on a cold winter's morn on 1989, I went for my first wild night camping. No, I think I've probably cut it down a lot since then. That was the first spew of just everything. And it's got things like kind of mini gear reviews, camping in different places, winter camping, a few things like that. So I quite like to just have like one resource with everything in that you could just go back to. But it could probably do. I mean, there's lots of other little shorter ones that we write to that are like, specifically about gear. So certainly not. It's a good bit of bedtime reading. I think you could get through that over a few days.
Well, I'm just thinking now, just ignore what I said, I think, and read that. I think that sounds like a much more extensive description.
But it's always good to hear people's thoughts on it, and I don't think I've got anything in there about fluorescent tents. So. Don't take your rave tent. I don't know. We'll have to have a look, but we'll add that as well. Okay, last one on this, Harrison, before we jump into cooking. So, why do you think your story has resonated so well with people?
Oh, that's a hard one, isn't it? I mean, that's not really for me to say. I don't think it's something that, for me, putting it out there was something that I could never imagine doing back when I was in my darker sort of days, really. I mean, there'd be moments where I didn't even want to be here, really didn't want to sort of exist anymore. And I often sort of have that realization now, I think, when I am talking about it, whether it's publicly on sort of stages or through corporate talks or even just on social media, that this is so far removed from something that I did in the past that it's a bit beggars belief, really. But for me, hard to say, but resonating wise, I think, because there's many people who do suffer from this, I think, and think they're alone all the time. So I think sometimes just having that out there, perhaps as a voice for maybe the voiceless to a degree, I think is something that people sometimes pick up on. and perhaps can see similarities and think, yeah, it's not just me. They've gone through that as well, and resonated in that degree. But it's always been something for me that I share on the purpose of trying to help another these days. For me, it's if it can help somebody else going through those struggles, take a step into maybe a more positive avenue, or out that sort of Groundhog Day syndrome that they can be in, then that makes my struggles all the more worthwhile that I've gone through in the past. So again, sometimes I think it can be beating the same drum. I've got, there's a few friends who sort of joke that it's almost, you're sort of selling the same story over and over. But it's to me, I think again, it's not always about those that maybe heard it the one time. It's about the new person hearing it perhaps, and that needs to hear it at that particular time, that's going through a particularly difficult period. And maybe, just realising that they're not alone and not to suffer in silence, and that there is hope on the other side. And I can never imagine being here. I didn't think I'd be getting this far in life, to this age, to this degree. I couldn't see, a moment without a drink in my hand at one point. And, the idea of walking up a hillside would have been, I'd have laughed you out the pub. It's so far removed. So it just shows what can happen. And again, for me, it was all quite intense and quite confined into a year. It was a huge change from a year. From that first day, the 6th of June 2016, was the day I vowed to leave alcohol behind. I felt like I'd become someone I wasn't. I'd been unfaithful to someone I loved at the time, and I'd be lying if I wasn't trying to win them back on that initial moment. But I threw myself into a world of fitness, threw the cigarettes in the bin, tried to lose all this weight I'd put on. And little by little, again, there's that first hill of Blencathra, Hellvellyn, Scarfell Pike. By the end of the year, I've been at Snowdon. 7 months later, in Pen Nevis, and 11 months down the line, I was lining up for the start of a marathon. And within 1 year, a complete chameleon change. I mean, those looking from the outside, people who've known me from both sides, it must have been such a bizarre time to see me going through that particular phase of. But to me, if it can say anything, it just shows what is possible, and that change, it's never too late to make that change, and that so much can change in that short period of time. So that's why I keep sharing, in the hope that somebody else who maybe thinks there isn't a way out can maybe see that there is.
Well, yeah, I think you summarised it beautifully, but the fact that it's never too late is, I think, for me, part of the reason why your story resonates. And then such a quick turnaround. I think it's very inspiring because it lets us all know that it's very easy to get into living life and associating yourself as being this person. But knowing that you've got that freedom to always reinvent yourself, I think is really inspiring, which is why it's great to share your story. So
Thank you.
Let's get on to cooking. So I'm really interested to dig into cooking, actually, because I just don't really know. I'm not a great cook. Got a few dishes down, like mainly kind of barbecue, salmon,
Nice, yeah.
and not that many more things. My girlfriend's an amazing cook, so she loves to cook, so she cooks everything. But I'm intrigued. I would love to kind of get into it. How did you get into cooking?
So cooking has been sort of the passion that I can recall the longest, really, for me. It's been something that one of my earliest memories has been sort of, I suppose, being around food. I did a lot of cooking with my grandmother growing up. I was the oldest of the family, sort of all the cousins. I was the firstborn, and was often sort of spent there and basically put to work, I guess, being the older of the grandchildren. So always chipping in, always helping. But I love the fact that it brought people together, and it brought them around sort of around the table, or be it around the barbecue, around sort of like campfire feel. Food just brought people together. And again, seeing it from different sort of cultures and different avenues as well, that seemed to be always the theme, the fact that it was always a big occasion for whether it be a village or the family or friends. Things always revolved around food. So that was a big pull initially, and a big initial kickstarter to the passion. But then also the flavours of things. I guess I enjoyed eating the food too. So that was a nice bit. But then those little bits, I guess, of those first initial tastes just sparked that sort of, I guess, intrigue of what comes next and what can you pair with this, and experimentation. And so I quite quickly began to really become a bit of a scholar to it, I guess. I'd watched a lot of cooking programs even as a child, reading cookbooks. I didn't read a lot of sort of fictional books or even watch sort of children's television. I was just religiously watching cooking shows and then picking up little bits. And and always wanted to explore different cultures, different ingredients, whether it be the restaurants that we had sort of in Carlisle and stuff, which wasn't too diverse on its aspects in this sort of area, but still embracing that and just seeing, what other people maybe grew up with and what was their sort of childhood meals growing up and what they'd go for. So loving that and experimenting sort of further. And just as the years went on, having more access to it, I guess, and picking up little bits more and just constantly researching and I suppose being a scholar to this degree. So that's where it began, very young age. So, and also I worked quite a lot in the hospitality trade too. So I got my first job in a pub. I think I was maybe 12, 13 when I got my job there, sort of thing. So I've always been quite maybe a large build, even for my age at that point. So I managed to sort of tell them I was a bit older than I was, get the job in there, get to work, and spend my time wisely. So if I wasn't getting put to work by my gran, sort of in the kitchen that way, sort of whether it be washing up or around the oven, it was now finding work from a young age into the pub. So I just began sort of pot washing in the back of the kitchens. And again, I wouldn't really say it was any sort of haute cuisine, the place I was in at the time. But even so, you pick up little bits from there, pick up different recipes and elements. And that progressed into sort of going into waiting on at a slightly older age, to behind the bar, to little spells of covering kitchen absences and chefs that have maybe moved on and job vacancies. And also working with many people in the industry and just picking their brains and always listening, I think, and just finding out different elements from different people. So being a listener rather than always diving in too much. But yeah, that's been a big way of how I've got into food and something that's really become a staple throughout my life.
Very cool. So you mentioned a few things like becoming kind of a student, watching cooking programs, but for people like me who are rubbish at cooking but would like to get better, what would you recommend as like the few things to do? Do you have any specific books that are really good, or any specific programs, or what do you think I should do? What advice would you give me if you were like, want to teach me to cook in a few weeks?
A crash course.
Yeah.
Maybe I should write an 8,000 word ebook maybe about this.
We will post it for sure. People will see it. Yeah, let's do it.
One of those. But it's a difficult one in terms of, I guess there's no particular one book I'd say to go straight to and pick up. Again, like anything, I think it's a lot of practice. It is a lot of practice in these things. Things don't come to hand straight away. There can be elements of sort of naturalness to things. But in terms of cooking, I think it's experimenting with flavours and putting things together. It's a bit like chemistry in a way, I guess, isn't it? The way you're putting different components together, working out what's working with what reacts with certain bits. But I mean, starting off maybe with the barbecue, for example, I mean, you like that sort of aspect. That's initially was my first foray into sort of outdoor cooking. It's often the bit where when you ask people if they've tried any outdoor cooking, some of them go, no, I haven't. But, we've all had barbecues and that growing up sort of thing. Again, not too often in this country, because again, we don't often have the weather, but it's something that we've generally enjoyed, and especially maybe more sort of blokes-wise as well. I mean, you're not exactly breaking any stereotypes there by letting your girlfriend do all the cooking, but it's.
I'm not allowed to do any cooking. I mean, admittedly, because I'm rubbish. But yeah, so I
think sounds like you've just given up. You're not giving it a go. You've not tried.
I could do more. You're right. It's kind of hard. I think in some ways when you're really, really busy, you have to pick the things that you want to do, right? And I have a couple of jobs, and then love climbing, surfing. I like to do yoga, work out, and go and see mates, and then go and to do some bikepacking, mountain biking. So there's only so many things that you can fit in the day. I feel like cooking is something that I would really like to do when I get a bit older. I mean, it sounds mental at like 32, doesn't it? Just like you haven't learned. I mean, I can cook a few things, but you know what I mean? Like really delve into it as a foray and go like down the rabbit hole, because I tend to get quite obsessed with things once I get into it. So I can't really do it just a little bit. But cooking, I mean, it's something that brings people together. Everybody loves. Most people love food all around the world. It's been from like traveling different places. It's been a great way to connect with people, and they love sharing food with you. And it's like one of the most special things when you meet somebody, even if you can't speak the same language as them. They'll like invite you in for dinner, and then you all have some chicken soup, and everybody's hunky dory. So it's got a real magical power, food.
100%. But I think you touched on it there, really, in terms of the whole the time aspect. I think that's a big thing you often hear, the sort of convenience factor of things, that it's easy to pick up something on the go, or again, even in the outdoors, whether it be those sort of dehydrated meal packs and things that, again, are not often there because they're, more flavoursome. There's a lightweight element to them, which I completely get. And they do have their place, of course, in big expeditions and things, where I think they are essential for survival and that access to those things. But generally, it's the convenience factor, isn't it? I think it is that time element that people think it's something that they can cut out rather than go with. For me, it's always been quite a priority. So I don't like to sort of skimp on my food in any sort of way. I've never been someone who's really been a big fast food eater or lover sort of thing. So I'll always try and produce nicer bits because it tastes nice and it's more nutritious for us. So I think, to me, it's where you put it on your priority list sometimes. But again, if you mention you're quite busy that sort of way, what I'd suggest, I reckon, is more sort of batch cooking, I reckon. Again, rather than sort of you spending all that time with, maybe, I don't know if it's as far as ready meals, or if it's just eating things your girlfriend's cooked.
No, never ready meals. She's
ready meals.
No, allergic to ready meals.
Well, that's good. Well, that's one step at least. But maybe you sort of the pre-made sauce sort of avenue then. So you maybe stage 2. But it's
she makes everything. But she's Polish, and her mother's an amazing chef. So there's no buying any pre-made anything. It's always making everything. So that's why I also can't really get in on it, because it's a 3-hour jobby to make pierogi, or
Yeah.
But I mean, tastes great. But so batch cooking was one thing that you mentioned. But how about any other meal tips? Like, if I was going to try some things for myself, what would be a few good dishes for me to try to go and cook if I was, say, spending a night out?
Well, usually how I start it is by saying, choose something that you cook quite often in the kitchen and start there. But that's a bit of a struggle with you, I guess, George. I suppose you could start with that salmon fillet you mentioned, maybe, but then it's not. You need some accompaniment to that, surely. Unless you're just going to go on maybe quite a paleo diet, I guess, in a way. Isn't it just meat? Maybe just there, meat on a plate.
Yeah.
It's a start. But it's, for me, generally that's how I would go. I do see it as more as the dehydrated sort of element is sort of the one stage, or it could be one of those, cup of soups or even couscous kind of things that a lot of people do come to, and can be good accompaniments, to be fair, and a good lightweight option, especially for some multi-day things like that, can complement fresh food as they go. But it's taking that a stage further, and I think there's different bits where you can cook corners in little bits where you could be preparing your veg and packing that out into where you head out first, or you could even be preparing the sauce at home, or even having your girlfriend prepare the sauce in your case, packing that out with you just to reheat when you're out in the outdoors. So that's one step there. It's one step into sort of fresh food where you're just reheating it to a degree, but it's still a nice fresh meal rather than the dehydrated sort of element. And you can even throw in bits of that, like carry sort of your dried pastas, your dried rices, which don't have that water weight to them. So you've still got a slight lightweight element for longer distance. That's initial sort of starts, I'd say, beginner steps into it. And as you go further along, I guess it will take, for me personally, I like to prepare things as much as I can on location. So I sometimes head out just for a cook, as you would with a climb. But I'd head out sort of just to do that, to take in maybe the sunset, enjoying that sort of alfresco experience. I love the primal element to it, the fact that, we initially began cooking over fire sort of ancestrally. And as that sort of developed and refined into more sort of, your clay pot ovens and cooking underground and more sort of kitchen setups we have now, taking those more refined recipes and elements back into their roots where they came from. So that primal element is that's what I like to see the connection with. But at that element there, I think it's slowing down, taking in those views and having that sort of quite mindful experience too, of sitting there and just chopping all the bits up and building that dish together slowly but surely whilst out in that environment. But I guess maybe those who don't like cooking maybe don't get that same appreciation from that sort of mindfulness and chopping. I mean, I'm quite happy to sit there prepping away a little bit. So though, yes, there is the idea, the fact you've got to carry the stuff up there first, which could be obviously adding a few more bits to it. For me, I see it as it's more well-earned calories, to be fair. I think when I get there, I can eat more of the food I enjoy at the top because I've been carrying this big, heavy pack to the top of the fells. So they're the initial steps, I'd say. And then I guess if you're going right the way through to sort of the final sort of stages, I've done anything from sort of baking breads out there from scratch to even sort of making my own pastas, sauces from things.
Wow.
even taking things the full way. I mean, one of the most sort of complex dishes I did components-wise was probably something like a katsu curry from scratch in the hillside. So again, that was, taking all the chicken, breading it all, sort of, egg wash, flour, breadcrumbs, shallow frying that again, packing the oil back out, leaving no trace as always, but also the sort of sticky rice elements, and then the sauce, boiling that sort of down, refining that to the full element, and then of course finishing with my garnish, which of course I appreciate is a bit of a first world
Wow.
the hillside, but I like to have that aspect of it looking nice for me too. Even I mean, it's just I don't know.
It's amazing. It's like blowing my mind because I've never seen anything like it. Like it's so different to, and I love the idea of taking all the stuff in there and going to cook specifically, like not prepping as much as you can at home, like going for a sunset and cooking out there. I can imagine it being like really meditative and like very stilling, just like listening to you chopping carrots, like looking out on an amazing view. It sounds really, really cool. I might have to join you on my first one, but
absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm inundated with offers to join me, Joe. I'm inundated with offers to come, but they never offer to carry any of the gear, but they always enjoy using the meal. But I'm sure we can get you in. Maybe we do a bit of a beginner's guide. Maybe we sort of take you in there and start you off, and maybe you can refine a recipe, and then you can take that back and impress your girlfriend next time you're out.
That would be great. Let's definitely do that. Yeah. Come up to the lakes and we'll do it. The
100%.
last one in it, you mentioned the kind of gear. What if somebody's looking to get into it? What gear recommendations do you have?
Yeah, so as you've probably gathered already, I'm not the person to ask if you want any lightweight options. I'm not. That's not something that I go through. Generally, for me, if I get it in my backpack, I'll take it up the hillside. I'll take it on the walk. I think it's not an element for me of skimping on elements, whether it be the food or be the equipment. So. A lot of people, they generally pack really small burners and things just to sort of boil the water up again, the dehydrated meal. So again, if you're that sort of aspect and you're quite stuck with your guns and you're not really wanting to branch any further from that, then I think I'm not really putting much of a case together here, and I understand that's fine. Different ways of doing things for different adventures. But for me, I think initially, obviously, the key component is that heat source, whether or not it's a smaller burner. I try to get something that's got a bit of a wider flame head. Replicates more of the hob at home, therefore you don't get that quite intense heat spot on the bottom of your pan. A bit more of a spread. Again, that's more on your gas sort of settings. It could be a fuel-based stove as well. Or I've even used little controlled wood-burning stoves, which are great. Again, I really love that aspect of having the fire out there. Again, it's raised off the ground slightly, so you're leaving no trace, you're not scorching any earth below it. You can scavenge your fuel, you can also pack a bit of fuel out of you to get started. But again, you've then got that lovely aspect of that real fire as well, the sights and sounds of that, the smells, and also, again, being able to use that fire just to sit around and even keep yourself sort of warm and using it a bit as nature's television for me at the end. So I think that's a lovely aspect that you don't get with a gas stove. But they're sort of the initial components, I guess. And on top of that, obviously, a good sturdy sort of pan. There's lots of those now that are quite fold down. The handles fold down, or they're sort of quite lightweight. The titanium aspects are grand, but there's also some really good ones that are almost quite cook grade pans now for the outdoors. There's a lot of brands doing fantastic bits of kit there that you don't have to add much more weight to your pack, and you can still use that sort of void fill of the pan to pack things into as well. So it's not taking up much room in the bag. It's not like you're taking a whole pan that's going to be that big element in your pack. Things can go inside there, and it's still going to take up just the thinness really of the outside of the metal. So heat source, pan, and then for me, I guess if you're not prepping the stuff at home, it would be the knife and chopping board would be my essential bits of kit. So stove, pan, knife with a sheath is always important as well. I think, or a foldable knife. You don't want to be tearing your bag with a knife just thrown in there loosely. Again, there's also the aspect that you could reach into it and cause injury. And a lightweight chopping board. I think that my first bits of kit that you can get a lot of dishes done, a lot of nice one-pot dishes there, sort of like you could have your stew or your pasta sauce through there. Risottos work really well. You could do a nice sort of like Tuscan bean stew in there, perhaps. Be fantastic. Or even sort of curries and elements in there. So the one-pot dishes, chilies work really well with that basic setup as a starter. So that would be my sort of first bits of kit. And again, I like to sort of reuse where I can as well, recycle a little bit. So again, although I said I'm not really the lightweight guru, I suppose I can maybe, it's maybe something for the future. I might try and do some more lightweight dishes for the real lightweight connoisseurs, those who are really anal about their the weight of their pack.
Yeah.
But it's But going forward, I think that what I do is I will decant things down. So I'm not taking a whole bottle of oil up there, for example, when I'm heading up. I'm not taking, salt and pepper shakers and all the different spices from the cupboard. I'll decant those down into various bits. So old sort of toiletry bottles can be great, or old sort of miniature alcohol bottles. Again, not something I have in the house much these days, being sort of sober over 5 years now, but it's a lot of people have access to those. They're great for sort of oils and syrups and vinegars in those. And then other little elements that old sort of pots you can wash out a little bit, sort of screw top lids for spices, again, coffees and sugars, taking those to decant them down or make those spice mixes up at home. It's a nice lightweight option. So I personally, people think I've got my own Tupperware brand when they see some pictures on Instagram, the little blue pots near my hand, but they're actually just they're old hair gel pots that I just wash out and recycle and just take them up there. But really lightweight option. Again, you're reusing those elements, reuse, recycle where you can. And a great tool to sort of take up elements and ingredients into the hills without getting them all over your backpack, because that's the last thing you want really is all the food in the bottom of the bag. It's just no good for anyone.
Yeah, I love it. Top tips. So, are there any brands that come to mind for the burners or the pans, or none in particular?
There's many. I mean, I like to think I've got quite an open relationship with stoves, so I sort of I don't like to sort of target just any particular one brand at the moment. I'm quite free on who I sort of go with, but I've got quite a few burners now myself. So the first one I started off was a BioLite stove, as a wood burning stove.
Yeah,
that is a great aspect where it's got obviously little probe inside which charges a battery. So you actually you've actually got an adjustable fan with the real fire, so you can adjust a real fire like you would at hob at home. Quite unique in that aspect. Also got a USB charging point built into it, so you can charge your phone while you're out there as well. So it's quite a nifty bit of kit. I've then got a few Alkit stoves, a few of those, quite a large setup that's really set up sort of van lifers really, but quite a big sturdy stove with a big flame head. Again, I'm usually cooking for multiple people, so again, not probably suitable for someone who's just by themselves. A smaller burner would absolutely do the job with a smaller pan. But I'm generally cooking sort of maybe 4 to 6 people sometimes. So larger burner, larger pan for that state. And I've recently got a few other little new ones I'm testing out. So I've got a nice little Optimus twin burner at the moment, which is a fantastic bit of kit. So 2 burners that run off 1 canister. Only weighs about 400 grams built down as well. Really small sort of oblong bit slides in the side of the bag. So that's quite a bit of a game changer, that really. Again, you've got curry and rice on the go at the same time.
Yeah.
Or again, the breakfast, you've got your coffee pot and you've got your bacon sarnie going on at the same time in the morning. So that's a great bit of kit. I'm really enjoying that so far. Quite unique in terms of on the market too for its lightweight ability, and certainly that fact that it's on a single gas canister. There's quite a few that run off 2 for the dual burners. So there are a couple, but there's so many out there. And again, I mean, even your sort of your jet bores and your brew kit sort of things that are the quick water boilers that are brilliant for your cup of tea or your dehydrated bag in the wild. Quite lightweight, packed down small. They're fantastic for those jobs. Bit tougher when it comes to cooking sort of more refined dishes, but it's still possible.
Yeah.
I found them quite good for cooking up carb-based stuff. So great for sort of keeping a rolling boil going for rices and potatoes, pastas, to perhaps complement another stove. There's a couple of you with 2 stoves. Using them both to create that meal in the evening can be quite a good little extra bit of help. But yeah, I think where there's a will, there's a way. And for me, it's half part of that challenge of recreating dishes that you do at home in the outdoors and seeing what's possible, really. So it's challenge aspect is a bit of fun for me as well.
Yeah, very cool. Well, I am definitely excited about giving it a go, about trying to cook some stuff outside. So thanks for coming on the show, having a chat and inspiring people about getting outdoors and cooking. So if people want to find out a little bit more about you and your story, where's the best place for them to follow you?
Yeah, so I'm on all social platforms. So I guess Instagram is probably my main one, but I'm on across all them all. You can find me at all of them at Foodie. Again, I've got a website too, which fellfood.co.uk. Find bits on there. So again, generally sharing all the recipes, my sort of adventures on there, the dishes I'm cooking up in the fells, but also still sharing that sort of backstory as well and those sort of tales of the old days, battling depression, sort of suicidal thoughts, the alcoholism side that I think is quite important still. So, and again, how the outdoors is such a great healer for that and a great therapy, and allows me to sort of keep depression at bay, really. I don't think it's something that you do cure. I think it's something that really you do struggle with from time to time for long term. But the outdoors has certainly been a big healer for me and a huge catalyst for this turnaround.
Yeah, Awesome. Well, thanks again. It's been awesome to chat. It's been really, really cool. I'm really glad that we managed to finally connect and make it work. It's really cool to discover something completely new, like cooking outdoors for me, because I've seen a lot of stuff in the outdoors, but cooking outdoors is not something that I've really seen that much. So it's really, really cool to open up a new avenue and have something new and exciting to try. So thanks for sharing your story. Thanks for coming on. And yeah, we'll have to connect again sometime soon and go out for a hill walk and some cooking.
Absolutely. Let's book that in.
Sounds good. All right. Well, thanks for coming on, Harrison, and thanks, listeners and viewers, for tuning in. So until next time, thanks very much.
Thanks, George.